Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I'm your host, Maryann Petri. I have a brand new guest on. Her name is Nicole Anderson. She's a certified peer support specialist out of Phoenix, Arizona. She is certified in peer support and dedicated to helping others healing and spreading awareness about psychological abuse, often called hidden abuse or narcissistic abuse. She has healed a lot of her child abuse trauma and trauma with CPS and wants others to know they can too. She's a jack of many trades and can be found on TikTok at Transmuting Black Cat LLC. And we're going to have ourselves a conversation about, people lying in court and false accusations. And I welcome you to the show, Nicole. How did you get into being a certified peer support specialist?
Healing my trauma actually took me that route. I was in with my trauma therapist, and she actually recommended it for part of my trauma healing. And that's really when I got into being able to help others work through similar, very dark and dense traumas.
Because I've never how did you, is there a class that you take?
There are institutes here in Arizona, and they have other locations across I believe the world is RI
Mhm.
Institute, and they do a certification class. There are other places that you can also get certified in that.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's good to know. There probably should be more of you out there with
Thank you.
all the trauma that is caused by, family conflict and CPS and people having their kids removed for no good reason based on a false accusation,
Yeah,
you know.
it
Um,
is tough out there right now.
yes. You know, what happened to you to bring you this far?
My kiddo, actually. I looked at my kiddo and I looked at the in-laws, and I said, if I do not do something to change and heal my trauma, it's going to continue to be passed down. Because what happened to us wasn't a one shot off. It was carried down on that side. There's extensive trauma going back to grandparents and probably great grandparents. And looking at my kiddo, it was almost a year after my case was closed, and I was still so angry inside. And I looked at her one morning and said, I have my family back. I have my kiddo back, and I'm still living like this. I'm still angry and still trying to find a way to make them pay for what they did. And I looked at her. She walked in with her beautiful smile and said, Good morning, mommy. And I broke right there and said, if
Oh,
I do not heal this, she's going to end up just like me. She's going to go through the same life experiences that I did. Because when we don't heal ourselves, we pass it to the next generation. Because when we don't heal, we can't be healthy for ourselves. We can't be healthy for each other. You can't be a healthy parent if you don't know how to be healthy for yourself. And before my healing, I wasn't who I would want to be as a parent. And I didn't want her to have my life.
at least, you know, some people recognize this and some people just don't. They feel they can handle things on their own. They don't need a counselor or, any help like that. And, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, you know. When this all happened, did you immediately seek out help?
No, no. We got her officially back February, I believe, 11th, 2017. And it was not until the summer, no, actually August of 2019 that I was finally able to get into trauma therapy. So come the summer of 2018, I had found that I needed help. I couldn't get through on my own because I had tried everything up until that point. And it took me a good year and a few months to get into trauma therapy. That's when I started my research online and really started, because I said, I can't, my kid cannot wait a year. My kid cannot wait till whenever there's an opening. So I actually started teaching myself many of the skills that I learned in therapy by scouring the internet, by reading self-help books, by reading mindset books, and changing the way that you think about things, the patterns that you go through when you're thinking about things. So I put in a lot of legwork on my own because, again, I did not want her to live the life that I had. Not only did her dad come from a long line of trauma moving back, but so did I. I didn't come from a healthy childhood. I came from child abuse. I was abused as a child growing up, bounced around. I was not shown that love. So I definitely knew, since I didn't receive that love, I didn't know how to love. I didn't know how to interact with somebody without the lens of my trauma being in front of me. It was almost like wearing foggy glasses and you can't see, nothing is clear. And a lot of the times when we can't see, when we don't understand, the number one emotion that comes out is anger. So there was a lot of yelling, there was a lot of ignoring, there was a lot of shutting down. And I knew from the life that I came from, that was definitely not going to be something that was going to help her. I did, before the trauma, cut out the physical. We've never been physical with her because I was physically abused. But I knew that without somebody coming in and really helping me work through the deep rooted stuff, until I got all of that out, nothing is going to change. And the cycle was going to continue down. It, like it has with her father. He's not in the picture. We are still married, but he's not in the picture because the trauma is just too much sometimes. And sitting with the pain that comes with that, because what people don't understand is, yes, people are afraid of the unknown. Who am I going to be after this? I don't know who I am without my trauma. But you have to sit with yourself and you have to look at all of yourself, not just the victim, not just the things that were done to you, but you have to look at the things that you've done. You have to look at the behavior that you've taken on, that you've adopted to survive. You've got to be able to honestly look at everything that you had to do to survive so that you can start to unpack that. Because when we stay looking at things from a victim standpoint, we can't see our role in it as an adult. As a kid, not our responsibility, not our fault. But as an adult, we have to unpack that stuff. And unfortunately, I don't know that he's reached a place that he can sit, because that's some heavy stuff to let out when you come from families that don't show you love. It's a lot to unpack and it's painful. It hurts a lot.
Some people, do you think some people just never recover from these things?
Yeah.
Like they're lifers of this trauma.
Yeah. Complex PTSD, when you go through situations like this, because it's not a one and done. CPS cases and childhood trauma, those are consistent abuse. And when you get tangled in with CPS, those are sometimes a year or more cases where you're consistently going through the battery of that. I got lucky in my case that I had a phenomenal judge, and I had two workers that stayed on the case to make sure that nobody could come in and throw things off, because they saw the work that we were putting in. But when you throw in substance misuse on top of trauma, that is a web that is almost impossible to get out of, because you numb for so long that you forget that pain. And then when you feel that pain again, it's 1,000 times more painful than it ever was when it happened.
Also with this CPTSD, a lot of people don't know what that is. And, it's so hard explaining it to people that, you've been through the fiasco of CPS, what they put you through, and the false allegations that turned into, perhaps job loss, career loss, loss of your children. It's a lot of people just don't understand. They just stare at you and don't know what to say.
PTSD is more so linked to one event, like a car accident. So you know that every time you go to drive, you may have some kind of triggers there. When you're talking about complex PTSD, you're talking about a multitude of traumas that consistently happen over the course of a long period of time. So it's no longer, well, I have trouble driving. It's, I have trouble leaving my house. I have trouble trusting people. I have trouble seeing the world as a friendly place because
Mhm.
it changes the entire way that you see the world, that you see yourself, that you see people. It changes the entire way that you interact with people. When you have the closest people to you work together to put together a false report, how do you trust anybody after that?
Mhm.
When you are told that they're watching and you have cops constantly driving by your house, knowing that the other party is tied with the cops, you're scared to leave your house. There was probably 3 years that I did not let my kiddo outside of the house unless she looked picture perfect because I was terrified that her hair being out of place or her clothes being dirty or her having some kind of dirt on her was going to spark another case.
Mhm.
And that didn't just stem from one case, but when our it was passed to a different judge that ended up closing it out, he told us, this, you guys are the case of the year. This is not how cases end. I don't see cases like this often. This will be the only case I see successful in this year. 2 weeks after that, we had CPS back at our door because the same parties that filed the false report in the beginning filed another one through their therapist. So they were back at our door. So we knew that this was not going to be a battle where, one, we proved to the courts, we proved. I mean, I kept the case open an additional 4 months so that I could continue getting therapy. I could continue getting child development classes and so that we had the protection of CPS because they're already in our life.
Mhm.
We already have parent aides, we already have a case manager, we already have attorneys. So anything that they wanted to keep throwing at us, which they did, every time that they heard that the case was going good and we were getting closer to reunification, they'd throw in another false allegation. So when you go through that, you are in a place of, I always saw myself as like a chained dog. I was chained up, and there were these other dogs that would come and they would nip at me and bite at me. And if I attacked back, I fed right into what they wanted.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
wanted me to look crazy. They wanted me to look unstable because of my mental health background. So I had to sit there and allow people to nip at me and bite at me and tear my character apart, accuse me of things that I would never in a million years even think about doing, accuse me of not treating my mental health when there were full communication of all of the treatment that I was doing between us and that other party. And it brings you into this fear place where you're just sitting there, you're being attacked, and
Mhm.
then you retreat all the way in and you don't trust anybody.
Mhm.
It takes
And
a
that
long time to get out of that.
Yeah, and that's understandable. I too had one false accusation after another within they were within 4 days of each other. But these people that file these have no remorse because I figured out who they are. You can easily figure out, who keeps calling, but they walk around with no remorse and like you said with the CPTSD, you've got this anger because there's no justice. Even though I was exonerated from these things, there still was no justice.
And the courts don't hold them accountable.
Right.
They actually returned because the people who were party to filing the false report actually got custody of my kiddo for 6 months. And they held an emergency hearing and returned her to us within 6 months, which is unheard of with substance misuse a part of the case. And they returned her to us because they were fighting for the severance of our rights, even though family reunification was the entire case. It's always been reunification because it wasn't justified to remove her. And instead of holding those parties accountable, instead of holding the reporter that called stated that my house looked a certain way. She's never been to my house. She's never stepped in foot in that house. They don't hold them accountable. There was a licensed professional, a licensed occupational therapist that lied to the judge, provable lied to the judge. She was not held accountable. We were told that's not our job to hold people accountable for lying. And it's like, that could have landed my kid gone. That could have turned this case sideways.
Mm.
And that licensed professional is still working with kids in Arizona. And it's like, how can you allow people to do this and not charge them with all of the evidence? I mean, we had visits that proved it. We had court documents that proved it. And they don't want to hold anybody accountable for it. So it's like, where do we stop the false reporting? That doesn't stop until they're held accountable. Yeah, there's a nifty little thing when you call that says it's a felony to false report. But if people know that you're not going to hold them to it, then they're going to keep on reporting.
Mm-hmm. Even if you did hold them accountable and you were, say, I don't know, awarded X amount of dollars, they're not going to pay you that because they're not held accountable. Same thing. There's people that have, talked to people that have won cases and they're still waiting for money that's not coming. They don't enforce anything and no one is held accountable. And that's just very disturbing when this happens to anyone.
Yeah. My case was a rarity. My case does not typically go this way. I had a judge that was not pro CPS. I had an attorney that had worked on the child's side, so knew everything that was required. And I had a case manager and a parent aide that both stayed on my case until it closed to make sure that people like the licensed occupational therapist, who had no communication with me or the father, only with the in-laws that actually were cause of this, so that nobody like her could move in and change the route of it, because we know that there's a big payout when adoptions are made. There's a big payout for kids that are placed in foster care and that type of thing. And to have a case manager stay on the case for the entire year is unheard of. And she ended up quitting the day that the case went to court and closed. I called her to thank her and they said she's no longer here. She left with our case. It was that bad. It was that eye-opening. And the information that I gathered during that, after the lying by the professional, really opened my eyes to the fraud that is going on within CPS. I know they like to say that they've reformed it, that they are doing things better because of all of those calls that went unheard, but that from what I saw, that's not actually what happened. I, in one of the meetings, pulled out the court documents that were delivered to my door and stated 3 different fallacies in it, 3 different either lies by the investigator or lies by the in-laws, and it was just ignored. It's just a well type of thing. And it's like, hey, either the in-laws are lying and you are allowing them to have our kid, or the inspector is lying, which means the whole thing needs to be closed. But there's no accountability across the board at all.
No, I agree. There is, even if, you were lucky you had a good judge, but for the most part, I've heard like a lot of these judges will just go on the word of what CPS is recommending. And you're dealing with people that are not educated enough to even be around people. That's the scary part, much less children. And some of them, it could be a vendetta. They want to get even with you after they heard this from a one-sided interview.
Yep.
Just very, I just don't know. I think they should just be abolished.
They, in my opinion, do more harm than good. They do more harm than good. They did not investigate the in-laws. In fact, one of the in-laws was less sober than the father,
Mm,
than my child's father. She was just getting on treatment, not even 30 days sober. The stuff probably would have still popped dirty on a test,
mhm.
but they don't investigate any of that. And even that, when I brought it up to my attorney and was like, why is this stuff not mattering? I was clearly told you can either let this slide and let her go with family that you're hoping will treat her better, or she can be placed in the system with foster and you have no idea who's going to get her and what's going to happen. And I was like, what? um, why are you not just removing the person with the substance misuse problem in the home and returning to the mother then, who
Right.
doesn't have an issue? But the whole thing I feel is just, it's not set up for the parents. And if you don't have a good caseworker and a good parent aide and a good judge,
Mm,
you're not getting out of there, and your kid's not getting out of there.
mhm. And sometimes they get involved when there's a custody battle. Now, I always heard that CPS can't really get involved during a custody battle because they know attorneys are involved. I guess unless something really bad happens, but usually when you're in a custody battle, it's pretty much, I hate to say it, for lack of a better word, a stable battle, you know, it's hard to say.
No, if the other party is vindictive, all they
Yes.
have to do is call, and they're now CPS is involved as well. I mean, it's not hard to get them involved, even with like a custody battle going on. That was actually, that and grandparent rights were
Mhm,
part of the reason that my estranged husband and I stayed married,
mhm,
was because we had agreed when things started not working that we did not want the grandparent rights to be able to play a role. And if both parties are still married and both parties still agree that these grandparents are not to be in the child's life, then the judges, the courts aren't going to interfere with that. So part of the reason that we are still married is because it protects our child.
mhm. Oh, that's, uh, I I'm sure is that's different for each state with the grandparents'
Yeah,
rights, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah. Its grandparent rights are very strong in Arizona, very
Mhm.
strong.
What a sad situation that people feel they have to make multiple calls to CPS and waste their time on a false accusation when there's some kid down the block, you know, I don't know, being really tortured.
These are also church-going people, people that
Yes.
claim to be Christians and follow Jesus and do unto others as you wish to be done unto you. And that's just, it's not, it's not, and they use that
Mhm,
in their benefit. They use that community that they've built to justify their lies. In fact, one of the things that I was told by one of the in-laws was she has a good heart and she's just worried about the child. If you have to lie, then there's nothing to be worried about. You
mhm,
shouldn't have to create lies if your worry is justified. And that's the same thing that I said about the therapist. The therapist shouldn't have had to lie to the judge if her worry was justified. But that's the thing. They cover everything up with, we're worried about the kid. We're worried
mhm.
about the kids. When really you're causing more damage. My kiddo, she's got complex PTSD.
Mm,
She's got anxiety, separation anxiety.
mhm.
If I go to throw out the trash and I'm out there any bit longer than it should normally take, like if a neighbor stops me and says hi or whatever, she's crying when I get back in because she's scared I'm not going to come back.
Aw, that's terrible, that's terrible.
Yeah, yeah,
And this is what they're doing to these poor kids
yeah.
based on whatever, uh, accusation. Even, you know, sometimes lay awake at night and I'm thinking, "Okay, it's 11:30. I bet there's some nutty caseworker at some parent's door forcing some kid into their car. I know that sounds, but once you've dealt with these caseworkers and, uh, I don't know how yours treated you, but, I was completely screamed at for 2.5 hours on 2 separate days. Uh
They, my case was strange. They showed up at 1 o'clock in the morning.
mhm,
My kiddo had not been with us. She'd actually been with said grandparents all week. They showed up on a Friday night into Saturday at 1, and we were like, she's not here. She's been with her grandparents since like Tuesday. And they went over to the grandparents' house at about 8 in the morning, and then came over to our house and told us that we no longer had rights. They brought the cops and pretty much told us that we no longer had rights and gave us some paperwork and left. Asked to take pictures of the house, and we were like, no, my kid hasn't been here all week. I was so spent that I didn't do anything all week. I laid in bed. Um, and it was 2 months after that before we were able to see our child. They
and I'm
would
sure
not get back to us. They would
mhm,
not, like, it full on was to the point where they were having people send documents to my door to make sure that I got them,
mm,
because in my opinion, it looked very much like they were trying to have us miss court dates. That way, case closed. Because if the parents don't show up, what happens? They forfeit. They forfeit their rights. And we had already missed one court date because we were not getting the information. Nobody was emailing us back, calling us back. We weren't getting anything. And nobody would answer why. And then that's when, and I have no idea why that started, but I started getting documents delivered to my door. Somebody was knocking on my door and the paperwork was left at my door.
mm.
So much so that I was delivered documentation that I was told I should not have. And because I am of a legal mind, I've wanted to be a lawyer since I was a kid. I kept everything. And when
Oh,
we
yes.
went to meetings, I took everything. And they're like, there's no way you have that. And I pulled it out and I underlined it and highlighted and was like, here you go. This was delivered to my door. So I know exactly what's being said. I
Mhm.
know exactly what the investigator wrote in that. So my case was, as I've said before, not the norm, not the norm.
Mhm. When you got your child back, how did she behave towards you?
Um, she loved coming home, and she cried when we had to force her into the car seat to go back. And then when she got to stay there was when we really noticed the trauma. Before, this all started, she was 1.5 when this happened.
Mm,
Before she left, she was eating everything that I ate. I made my food and she was eating off of my plate
mhm,
exactly what I was eating. When we got her back, she wouldn't eat anything but my homemade mac and cheese, which is pasta with sauce and then just cheese in it. She would not eat anything but that. That's the only thing that I could get her to eat for a good, I think, 6 months. It was to the point that I was having to get like the carnation breakfasts and the drink, the shake type stuff, just so that I could make sure she was getting her nutrients. I can't say what happened at that house for 6 months. I don't know. I know that every time after that that she saw a bald-headed man, she would bury her head in my arm or in her dad's arm, and she would not have anything to do with it. And then the eating was huge for me because that was the only thing that she could control was her food and her speech. They said that she was mute. The in-laws told everybody that she was mute. She wouldn't talk. She talked with us. Her speech was regressed because of all of that. We
mhm.
ended up getting her into speech therapy at about 3 years old. I gave her time to decompress from having
Right.
all of the people in and out of her life and appointments and appointments and appointments. And about 3, I got her into speech therapy, and now she's in 2nd grade and she is above average in reading. She has some 4,000 more words than kids her age, and she's reading, I think it was like 47% better than the kids in her age. So she's come a long way. You would not know by talking to her today that she had that happen to her. You would see it in the way that she interacts with people. She's a little more cautious with
Mhm.
people, and she clings to me,
Mhm.
um, because her dad was in and out, and then of course she was taken, and we were in and out for those 6 months, well, 4 months that we were having visitation. So that really played a role on her, and
Mhm.
we saw it when she got back. In fact, she is now in therapy as well,
Mhm.
so that she can work through her trauma of all of that and through the trauma of the stuff with her dad, with him working through his trauma in the way that he is.
Mhm. To find her a child psychologist that gets all this stuff, was that very difficult? I'm thinking.
Um, yes and no. At
Mhm.
first, I was asking around and I didn't find a place that I felt confident in. And then the clinic that I actually was getting my trauma therapy through, they started a child sect where they were doing trauma therapy for kids. So as soon as they opened that up, I got her in with them. So she was with the same company that I was getting my trauma therapy through. So
Mhm.
I knew that they were equipped to handle it. And I knew that they had the training background to handle all kinds of trauma. And then when I first got her in, I went through the whole thing. So they knew up front everything that this 7-year-old has already been through.
Mhm.
And I can tell you that it has been amazing having her having that outlet, because she gets to talk about all of the things without worrying about hurting me.
Mhm.
She is very empathetic because of everything that she's gone through, everything that she's seen. She is very emotionally intelligent.
Mhm.
So she was holding, and I could tell she was bottling a lot of things because she didn't want me to be hurt by hearing. She didn't want to bring up the sad stuff and then me get sad.
Mhm.
So now she has an outlet that she can share all of it without having to worry about how is this going to affect mom, because she's a kid. She shouldn't have to worry about how it's going to affect me. She
Mhm.
should be able to talk to, whether it's me or somebody else, she should be able to talk to somebody to get that stuff out so that she's not shoving it down. That's one of the problems with the older generations, is we were taught shove it down,
Mhm.
get over it, let it go. Well, that's not the way that works.
Mhm.
When you shove it down, you're creating bigger monsters,
Oh.
bigger shadows, and physical ailments, stomach issues,
Mhm.
autoimmune issues. Like, you're creating all kinds of problems there. So I really wanted to make sure that she got in early enough that she could start working through this, so that she wasn't trying to figure it out as an adult like I was. She wasn't trying to figure out, why am I like this? Why do I think like this? Why do I behave like this? Why am I codependent? Why am I people pleasing? This is kind of eliminating that part where she gets more of a genuine life up front instead of being in survival for the majority of her life.
Mhm. Because I'm sure there's a lot of parents out there that just don't get the kids help, um, or, or perhaps they don't have the health insurance to even do that.
The health insurance, and then they're scared.
Mhm.
They've already dealt with this. So all it takes is one adult misunderstanding something,
Mhm.
and now you've got another situation and more trauma. The complex PTSD spans across everything. It's literally like a paranoia of you are terrified of everything. You are terrified of something looking the wrong way and somebody taking it and running with it. You're worried about something sounding different. I'm neurodivergent, so I've got ADHD and I'm on the spectrum.
Mm.
And the same with her. So we say things that are completely different than what a neurotypical person would say, and it's easy to misunderstand. I was very lucky that the therapist that she has understands a lot of that. She understands and is very, when she hears things that she doesn't understand, she comes and asks me, like, what was this about? And then I can, explain this, we were working on this or whatever the situation was. So that makes it a lot easier. But to find that is not easy. I
Mhm.
got lucky because I had an amazing therapist at a clinic that I had already been with for 3 years, that I had already built a trust with.
Mhm.
So going to somebody else in that company felt very natural. It wasn't like starting all over with people that we didn't know, because we trusted that occupational therapist that lied in court. We trusted, the in-laws. We trusted the other family members that helped with this. And if people that close to you can do that, strangers can't.
Mhm. Mhm. Most definitely, people are sitting ducks and they don't realize it. And back when I was at work, I would tell these young nurses, I would say, if your mother-in-law hates you, give the ring back and run.
Mhm.
I don't know. Um, because not, I mean, there are good mother-in-laws out there, but for the most part, some of them are very toxic.
You have to pay attention to the red flags these days, because it's no longer just a messy split up. It's serious business now.
Mhm.
It's a child's life. And we know all the stories of foster care.
Mhm.
We all know that. We all know what happens in those places a lot of the times. And the world has gotten to such a place where there is so much trauma on a daily basis. People are enduring trauma and they're not working through it. And the only thing that hurt people do is hurt other people.
Mhm.
So we've gotten to a place where there is more hurting people than there is healing people. And hurt people, just like healing people heal people, which is part of the reason that I got into doing what I do, helping people heal. Because the more that we get healing out there, the more that we show and we share our story, the more that people in our shoes say, hey, if they did it, we can do it. Because
Mhm.
there's nothing different from me and the next person that has trauma. The only difference is I took the time and the energy and I walked through all of that stuff until I weeded out my forest, until I got rid of all of that so that I had a lush forest that was full of love and self validation and self acceptance and self love, self care. And that's one of the things that's missing that leads to this is a lot of people are seeking their in-laws to fill a void that their parents didn't fill.
Mhm.
They weren't loved and cared for and given the attention that they needed. And that makes them a target for other people that are hurt because they're easy to target. I was an easy target.
Mhm.
I wanted that love and I sought after that love, and I would squish myself down to nothing to receive anything remotely close to it.
Mhm.
So it's we are in a place where we need to get healing to a wide scale. We need to get, I believe that healing and self care and mental health should be a part of public curriculum.
Mhm.
I believe that kids should be learning about their feelings, about how to identify them, about how to deal with other people's feelings, how to care for themselves properly. I believe that we should be learning about mental health and what it looks like at young ages. That's
Mhm.
part of the reason that I share all of this with her so that she can see it. So she sees red flags. She'll ask, well, why don't we talk to these people anymore?
Mhm.
Because of this, this, and this. And if people aren't going to treat us the way that we should be treated, then they don't have access to us because it's not healthy. We don't endure pain to keep other people. If they want us in their life, then they will do the work to heal and be healthy.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it starts with the kids. It all
Right.
goes back to the kids. If we don't start teaching them, we're going to have adults just like me that are trying to heal. And I tell you what, healing this stuff at a young age, watching her heal has been an eye opener compared to watching myself heal. It is much easier to heal at a younger age and process as things are coming than it is to sit down at 36 and say, why am I like this? Why can I not stand on who I am? Why don't I didn't even know what boundaries were. I
Mhm.
didn't know how to set boundaries. I didn't know how to hold boundaries. I didn't know how to honor anybody else's boundaries. Like, these are all things that I think that need to be taught in school if the parents aren't going to have time to do it. And nowadays, with inflation and everything else, parents don't have the luxury of one income anymore.
Mhm.
Most families are having to have both parents work to provide anything above poverty, even just barely at poverty level. A lot of the times, both of the parents are having to work.
Mhm.
If both of the parents are having to work, how can they be expected to put in that kind of time and effort and education? They don't have it. By the time they get off, they're exhausted. They're mentally drained, emotionally drained from work, if not physically. And then it's dinner time and it's homework. Then it's bedtime. Where do
Mhm.
you have time to do that?
I think you're absolutely right. This all should be started to be taught in school, grade school level all the way up to high school. That way these kids are you get it ingrained into their system, the red flags of what to look for with these personality disorders, people lying. They also need to be taught accountability.
Yes.
And I would like to see this being done soon in these school districts, but uh, in a way, you can't even hold these teachers accountable.
No, no. I don't have the answers on how to change things
I
when
don't
it comes.
either.
I know that we have to start with the kids and there needs to be a complete reform, but that comes down to the teachers are stressed, the teachers are overworked, the parents are overworked. um the normal people in society don't have the resources to do the job that they need to do, while the few are sitting up with way more resources than they need.
Mhm.
And it's come to the point where it's like, when are we going to topple that system so that we all have the equal right to raise and teach and learn and heal and grow without it being, well, we're going to sacrifice our mental health because we've got to keep food on the table. We're
Mhm.
going to sacrifice our mental health because we've got to keep a roof over our head and electricity on. We've got to keep gas in the car so we can continue to get to work.
Mhm.
And I don't I don't know that any of that changes until we the people can collectively come together and stop dividing over everything, until we can come together and say you matter and I matter, no matter what we look like or our background
Mhm.
or what we believe in or anything. We all matter and stand together. I don't know how we get that power back to change anything with the kids.
Mhm.
And the kids are the ones that are getting hurt the most. This new generation, they are so awake emotionally, and they can't handle the density, the stress, the rage and hate that this world is filled with. And they are just, they're snuffed out.
Mhm.
They're told, why can't you work that 40 hours, 60-hour job when it's barely paying the rent and the utilities and food anyway? you
Mhm.
can't you can't live. You're barely surviving, but you're
Mhm.
spending all of your time at that job. It To these younger kids, it that makes no sense.
Mhm.
Why are we barely surviving on a planet that is capable of providing for all of us?
Mhm.
Food grows.
Mhm,
Food
mhm.
grows.
Right.
Trees are here. Like we could do a lot of this without having the monetary that is here. And it's this consumer system that, in my opinion, until it comes down a notch or two or altogether, I don't know how the younger generation gets out from under that,
Mhm,
especially with the older generations pushing them down and saying, well, we did it. Well, things were a lot different when I was a kid compared to when, now that I'm having a kid. And
mhm,
things were even vastly different from when my parents were kids and when their parents were kids. So I think that the accountability goes further than just CPS. I think
mhm.
it goes all the way to the top.
Most definitely. You know, is there anything else you'd like to add? I could talk all afternoon, but this
I
flew
think we've
by.
covered so many topics too. No, I think that that's a good. I think that we covered a lot of stuff today.
We definitely did, and I'd like to have you come back on,
Oh, absolutely.
because I just think it's fascinating, becoming a certified peer support specialist. We need to even talk about that more and how people can get into that to help other people because I think there's such a big need for this.
I can, in between now and the next time that we talk, I'll gather some more resources for that and the process and everything, and we can really dig into that so that we can give the listeners resources if they want to get. It's not like a year-long process. It's something very doable for people. So,
Mhm.
I will gather up those resources for the next time that we meet.
Oh, I would appreciate that. If someone wants to reach you or has any questions, how can they get a hold of you?
If they want to reach me directly, they can reach me at tmblackcat@outlook.com, or they can jump onto my TikTok, which has a wide variety of resources. That is can't underscore silence underscore won't underscore sh with two H's, or Transmuting Black Cat LLC. Both of them should pull me up.
That's excellent. Well, hey, don't jump off. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Maryann Petri, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join me again here with Nicole Anderson in the future and other exciting guests. Thank you so much, Nicole. This was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It has been my pleasure.
I'm glad. Thank you.